All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. You are at People Are the Mission, Basics of Board and Team Management, the second part of our CCHF Catalyst workshop. It will be with Lance Luttrell, who is a Master's of Science in Industrial Engineering, currently works with DP3 Solutions. At the end of the talk, we'll be giving you 5 minutes to complete a survey. We'll pass around a QR code, and so we'd love to get your feedback on the talk. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Lance. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sam. All right, Sam's helping me remember that I forget to introduce things. So one of them is DP3 Solutions is business, my LLC. Stands for Develop People, Process, and Performance. And so that really is my passion, and how I got into that is wanting to find ways to bring things like systems thinking and operational efficiency to actually the development of people. So thanks for being here as a part of that talk. Sam also mentioned this is the second part of our Catalyst offerings today. So you'll get a taste of what we've been doing over the last year. This is new content for our Catalyst participants, but it gives you a sense of kind of the level and the type of topics that we've been covering together. And so hope that you find it useful, or that it occurs to you that somebody else might find this useful and that you might be able to recommend it to them for this coming session in the fall. Like Sam said, there'll be a survey at the end. I believe feedback makes me better, and so I would love to get your feedback at the end. And what we're talking about today is people are the mission. People are the mission. I can maybe stop if you could feel inside yourself what I feel when I'm saying that, I might be done. All right. So I just want to impart to you that when we think about being a mission-driven organization, that the people that are with us and the people we are trying to serve and be with, they are the mission. I'm trying to persuade you of that. My friend Rick Donlin is a fantastic persuader and galvanizer. He's great at getting people on from an emotional standpoint. I, on the other hand, am a math major, and the level of my persuasion is deductive proof. So buckle up here, okay? You didn't think that's what we were coming into, but here is a mathematical, little logical syllogism from Scripture. Here we go. Genesis 2:15, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Exodus 20:9 through 10a, 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. Leviticus 19:9 through 10, suppose you're harvesting your crops, then you do not harvest all the way to the edges of your field. Do not pick up the grain you missed. Do not go over your vineyard a second time. Do not pick up the grapes that have fallen to the ground. Leave them for the poor people and outsiders. I am the Lord your God. These are known as the gleaning laws. John 5:17, in his defense, Jesus said to them, my Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working. John 13, a new command I give to you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. 2 more slides to go. 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 3. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and make all of my employees give all they possess to the poor and make us work really hard for the good of others and give their bodies over to the hardships of this work so that we can boast to our donors and communities so they know all that we're doing but have not love, I gain nothing. Ephesians 2:10 and Titus 3:8, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. And this saying is trustworthy, and I want you to insist on these things, so that those who have believed in God may be careful to devote themselves to good works. These things are excellent and profitable for people. Here's the logical syllogism, if you couldn't track with me on that. Work is good. All right, I believe it. I love it. I like to work. I like to do hard things. I like to get stuff done. I believe work is good. And I'm reassured by the fact that it was present before the fall. All right? Secondly, we rest, but we work more than we rest. I know that's a crazy thing. It's such an American thing to say. All right, but we're given 6 days to work and 1 day to rest. We need the one day to rest. That was the commandment. We need to find it. But let's not lose sight of the fact that it is dignifying and good for us to have the 6 days of work, and we all know it. Sometimes the rest just gets too long of resting. You know, you get restless, is what we say, after too much vacation, right? All right, next one, work dignifies, but we've got to be intentional about it. Here's what I was meaning is like from the gleaning laws, the idea that instead of a handout idea there, the idea was, hey, don't try to be so efficient and maximize everything you do. Leave work for other people to do. Leave other work for people who aren't a part of your company, aren't a part of your business. Give them a way to participate in the economy that's going on. Give them a way to do what needs to be done there. Our Father and Jesus are at work. And we have been given work to use our gifts to redeem the world and show our love to one another. But love does exceed working in the end, right? So I was drawing on the idea that lest I just enable a bunch of taskmasters in the organization and saying work was all great. If we do all of that but have love, not have love, we have failed at something here. Okay, so here simplified one more time. We must love our brothers and sisters. Work dignifies people because it was dignify, worthiness, right? Dignity, worthiness. Why does it dignify? Because that's an expression of the image of God in us when we work. If God the Father's at work and Jesus at work, when we get to participate in doing work, we get to reflect the image of God in our, okay. So we must love our brother and sister, work dignifies, and as leaders, we see and have work that can be done to bless others. Therefore, we should find opportunities to engage others in the work as an expression of love. All right? So if I'm not sure where we are all mentally on that. This is just like what occurs to me. This is how like my brain flows through that. And I was really proud that I actually got it in some sort of a linear fashion. Okay. But here's my kind of the persuasion that I want to go through and the framework of some of just the very basic things that I'm going to talk about. I want it to be couched in this foundational part to give you the ability to think that now your intention is love when you're doing these very basic board recruitment, very basic HR functions. And all of a sudden, because for me, that like unlocks this whole world of like what happens in a moment when I'm doing what I have to do. And that's what I hope to impart with you today. So check, provided that's me. We just completed a basic theology of work. We're one down, all right? Number 2, I want to articulate the structure of governance and management of a nonprofit. Number 3, I want to outline basic best practices in board relations. And lastly, I want to outline some basic best practices in personnel management. All right? So I hope that's what you signed up for when you came in here. I have been really encouraged by the Catalyst group because I have found that some of these things are just helpful and just useful. And what happens with us, the longer we're in things, we succumb to something called the curse of knowledge. We know this, and now we can no longer remember what it was like to not know this. And so we begin to fail at imparting that to other people because we assume they know it. This is why we're admonished to tell our children along the way, and when we get up and we get down, teach them to remember this, do it over and over again, because they don't know what you know. All right, so I'm trying to do that, and I hope that's what you came for. So I believe nonprofits are bow ties. All right. I used to wear one in the math department, show up with my bow tie Tuesdays. All right. That's where it came from. But I like to think of boards or nonprofits this way, that on the one side, we've got a group of people. All right. And they're the board of directors. Many people that then say, we've got a purpose, a mission that we want fulfilled. And so we hire one person. We hire the executive director or CEO or president, whatever the title is, the one employed person to actually execute what we want done. And then that person on the other side then employs a bunch of people to oversee that, administrate it, management, and carry that out, okay? And so what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of look at both sides of the bow tie. All right, we're going to take a little time on the board side of it, and then we're going to take a little time on the staff and volunteer side of it. And why I think that's helpful, although there is a pitfall here, is because many of us, as we're either in leadership or as we're stepping up into leadership, find ourselves in this tension place where we've got a group of people over here and trying to discern their collective will as one voice, though I often receive it as 12 different voices at different times and not always in a structured format. And on the other hand, trying to deliver with one voice to 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 people, some consistent message on the other side. All right? Here's the pitfall. Sometimes people in here feel like it's their responsibility to do what's over here when they don't have that authority. Okay, so we're going to talk through it, but I just want to kind of call that landmine out here for a minute, because the attendees of this conference tend to be people here and here, and we're trying to do a better job of recruiting people more here and here. And I'm talking to this audience, so some of you, if you are board members or sit as a board member on other places, that's really what I'm talking about. And the rest of it is awareness for you, but I'm not trying to admonish executive directors to tell their bosses what they should do, okay? So we're just gonna go through some basics. Oh, that was the next slide. That was the long disclaimer that I just gave. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. Board points, here's what I hope to cover. I wanna outline governance versus management. I just wanna talk about those words and what they mean. I want to talk about the role of the bylaws. I want to talk about strategic recruitment and engagement of board members. And then we're going to go rapid fire best practices. Okay. I get amused by seeing my own slides again. I'm like, what was I thinking when I said this? This is just hilarious to me. Okay. Pitfall number 1 in board relationships: the board trying to do the staff's job and the staff trying to do the board's job. It just happens all the time, and it doesn't work great. Here's what happens. We've got this spectrum across the bow tie. On the one hand, we have governance, and in some nonprofits, even the executive director is included in governance functions. There might, in some nonprofits, even be 1 or 2 staff or volunteers that are on the governance side of things. For those of you that are on the community health center side of things, or federally qualified health centers, there is a line right here, okay, where there can be no employees that are on the governance side of things. All right, so then that depends, a lot of different structures on that, but that's generally how it goes. I don't know if anybody knows about the Dallas Cowboys, but there's this guy, Jerry Jones, who owns the team and tries to run the team. Okay, and so what happens is up in the owner's box, you got somebody who's wanting to call the plays on the field. And it is a notorious tension that makes it difficult for head coaches to do their job, all right, when we've got an owner up in the box trying to make calls on the field. Simultaneously, on the management level, these are the folks who make the plays, what players are going to be here and who's going to do this play today, right? So if we take that analogy, it's kind of helpful to think governance really is the sense of who owns this in the end, who has ultimate accountability. The idea of the role of fiduciary responsibility is a term that's used here that comes from the Roman idea of a trustee who their parents would have given money to somebody to take care of a child and their departure. So trustee or fiduciary. That's the owner, that's governance, that's the board, that's the role that they take, okay? But then the idea of what needs to happen today and what decisions need to be made and how do we carry that out needs to be left to the staff to actually be closer to those decisions. How do you discern between the two? Well, here's 7 things that can help. Number 1, is it big? What does big mean? I don't know, but you know, all right? I don't know how to give you more, but you have something inside you says, is this a big thing? Yeah, it's a big thing. Okay, it's probably related to governance somehow. Is it about the future? All right, how far in the future? Probably 3 years plus, or maybe a year timeline approving a budget's board, but longer time frame than that. Is it core to the mission? Is it a high-level policy decision? Is there a red flag flying? The reason I'm calling this out is this is more of just making sure that governance people are aware of potential pitfalls. It's more of an awareness piece. Is there a watchdog watching? What I mean is with the ultimate accountability of the organization on the board, if there's another entity that needs assurances that the organization is performing in accordance with those standards, likely the board needs to have some assurance themselves that it's being conducted correctly. And then another area that is a little bit more flex to the executive director or CEO, is this an area where they want and need the board support? That's like a carte blanche. If the CEO says, I need support on this, boom, fine. It's a governance issue because they need counsel in that way, all right? Everybody's into space again. Artemis 2 is coming back, hopefully catch it in the sky. But boards can be too hot, they can be too cold, and we need to find the Goldilocks zone of being just right. And so a board can be too hot if it's attempting to run the day-to-day operations of the clinic and promoting things like who should hire, who you should hire, right? Okay, I corrected that, y'all are with me. What person should be on here. And sometimes it's not like a board resolution. Sometimes it's like a board member coming to you, I think this person would be great for this job. That came with like that subtle implication that like, if you don't evaluate this, you're kind of in trouble, They didn't mean it that way, but the power dynamic kind of made it feel that way. That's a little too hot, all right? Which vendor to use? My buddy over here runs this business. I need to do this, right? It's a little too hot, right? How to resolve a problem. I think you need to fix it. This is what you need to do for that. All of these things can be received as counsel, but it's a little too hot if the board is leading into those things. That would be stepping out of governance and into some management discussions there. On the other hand, the board can be too cold if staff members are always the one leading the meetings. If they're the ones always doing the recruitment. If they're the ones, really bringing stuff and the minutes read like this. And so motioned and so sister seconded and it passed unanimously. And every single line item, just like boom, boom. I don't know what happened in there otherwise, but it makes me feel like they didn't really contribute to what was going on in here, right? So where should it be in the middle? Well, the governing board provides that fiduciary oversight for the organization, holding the mission. They hold the mission. So if you ever feel like the mission is right, well, what's the board? Where's the board at on the mission? That's going to be my first question, right? Through policy, budget, strategic planning, and hiring and evaluating of the CEO. If it ain't working out, if we're not doing it, the main trigger that the board has to say, you know what? We got the wrong knot in the bow tie. That's hilarious. In the bow tie. All right, we got to change the knot. We got to retie it. We got to get an executive director in there that can fulfill the mission we want to see it. They approve the direction through a collective vote that is the only singular voice of the board. The board doesn't have a voice other than its votes in a well-constituted meeting. The board is consulted with for expertise. Okay, second pitfall, not knowing the founding document, which is not a unique problem to nonprofits at the moment. The United States is constituted by something called the Constitution, okay? That is a governing document that divides the powers among the branches of the government, executive, legislative, and judicial, and outlines how there are to be checks and balances among those branches of the government. Pause as commentary. All right, next slide. The same thing is true in nonprofits, and we have something called the bylaws. And so you actually, I'm a pattern recognizer, mathematics, this has sort of trained me that way, but I have noticed and seen more and more the patterns of the American nonprofit system are structured intentionally after the federal government system that we have. There's meant to be a founding document. It's meant to embody a board, a collective group of people akin to a legislative body that then employ an executive director. And that tension over who has the power, is it the board or the executive director, is reflective of the legislative and executive tensions that exist in the federal government. Okay, in the case of the nonprofit, the bylaws, in some states, the articles of incorporation include the bylaws as well, are the legal documents that outline the rules, regulations, and guidelines of the organization. Most commonly, the bylaws outline the authority, composition, and responsibilities of the board. These are the Constitution and represent the highest authority of what is expected in the organization. It's also usually what creates this idea of a legal entity that can function like a corporation or an idea in the world, meaning this legal entity can buy property or this legal entity can enter into these situations because a document has allowed this governing body, the board, to do so or to deputize someone else, right? So that's the reason I'm like making these cases, because I didn't know. I'm just trying to I'm trying to say, here's what it is, but also its importance in knowing it. All right. So the pitfall here is a board having it and never reviewing it. I'm like daring to say this, in the executive summit, Rick encourages, read your Bibles. Amen. Boards, read your bylaws. Amen. Nobody really wants to. Okay, I get it. I think some of the things that board members and staff can do then is having tools that go alongside the bylaws to summarize or to highlight some of these key points, to call them out. But there is no real replacement for, you gotta read them. You gotta know what's in them and what's required of you. Okay, and then those need to translate into the minutes of the board. That's borrowed from something else. That's true, but not really what I want to get to. All right, the last thing is, I think the pitfall number 3 here with boards is convening the wrong council. There's a story in the Bible where there's this guy who was really, really wise because he asked God for wisdom, and he said, who could rule your people? Who could know the right decisions? Please grant me wisdom. And God gave Solomon wisdom along with long life and all these other things. Like other leaders, he made a lot of good decisions and he made some bad ones. Solomon Jesus even called him the wisest man who's ever lived. People came and visited him for the wise decisions he would make, and he had counselors. And then when his son took over, he said, you know what? I'm going to listen to my friends because I like what they say. They don't talk to me about gentleness and kindness. They talked about ruling with an iron fist. And Rehoboam he assembled the wrong counselors. He assembled the wrong counselors, okay? And so board recruitment is key. And this is honestly, this light bulb has come on for me in the last month. All right, strategic recruitment of board members. It betrays my personality that I think in terms of spreadsheets and analysis and percentages. I mean, the Matrix moment, it's you just see green lines everywhere. That's mostly how I perceive the world, okay? It's just scanning, all right, this is what we're doing, all right? So I've approached board composition with you gotta have these categories, and this is kind of the mix you want, and it's just without thinking about who at all is in the role, all right? Fine, that what that does is it achieves a reasonable mix of people, but it doesn't speak at all to where you're trying to go as an organization. And so that's so I'm learning as we go here. I think this is really healthy. If the organization and board and leadership say, here's where we're going to go in our strategic plan, well, who do we need to help us? Who knows anything about that? And my answer before would be I don't know, we're going to pay somebody to tell us what to do for that, or I'm going to go to ChatGPT and say, how do you do this? All right. A much wiser option, maybe we should find some counselors who know something about this area and see if we can recruit them onto the board for this season, rather than just thinking about somebody as a permanent board member forever, Also, identify expertise in the council needed in general. That's more the matrix side of things. But I think the other is for the current leader and management team, right? We have different strengths and weaknesses, and as there's a change there, some continuity is maybe helpful, but it might also spark a chance for wait, there's just a different skill set here. And so you're gonna need counsel that's different in that moment. And man, I'll tell you, when I see high-performing boards, this is one of the key items that's different about them. When the board owns its recruitment of its board members, it's categorically different than when the staff is trying to maintain the bylaws on behalf of the board and do it for them and go meet with them and essentially employ their own boss. This doesn't feel right, wait, I need counsel, but I really shouldn't be the one who's putting my people in place to have a healthy sense of accountability. I think there's a conflict of interest there, right? So I think when the board understands and owns that for themselves and says, we've got to do this, I see a lot of healthiness because then what happens is that they begin to be the ones who are able to articulate the mission. They own the mission, they've recruited people to the mission, and there's less threat that now there's a disconnect between the board and the staff over what the mission is because they've been rehearsing it and having to practice and having to do it. All right, rapid fire best practices, here we go. Ensure bylaws have term limits. Please, God, make sure your bylaws have term limits in them. They are good for the organization, they are good for board members, and they are good to force recruitment. I've heard all the time people that we got to extend the term limits because we don't have the people. No, it's because you didn't get out there and it's a numbers game. Get 10 names, meet with 5 of them that'll meet with you, put the ask to all of them, and one's going to say yes, I promise. It's just going to work if you do the work, but have term limits in your bylaws. Tip on there, stagger those cohorts. Take the board, kind of divide them up into whatever your term length is, usually something around 3 years. Get 3 cohorts and have them evenly rotate on that so that the term, the end of a term doesn't all line, and you lose everybody at once. Board-led recruitment, which I already said, but I would add into that vetting and training of new board members. I love when boards have like board enrichment committee or a board recruitment committee that takes it seriously to conduct the orientation of new board members. The board orienting the board. Now, maybe the executive director's there or staff is there, but it's the board's accountable for doing that. Create a board work plan, have a sense of what are we doing, all right? Now, this is where I'm trying to connect back to that earlier theology of work. Is what I'm saying is that as nonprofits, we're required to have a board here, but it's an invitation for people to contribute to the work we're doing. But as the leader, help outline what that is. Just clarify, what is it we're doing and when are we doing it? Make expectations clear up front and let people rise to them. I put that on there because this is a shortfall of mine. I tend to coddle too much, and one of my former bosses in here, and her advice always to me was could you please just hire someone who can actually do the job you're hiring them to do instead of trying to train them up to the job that you want them to do one day. I'm okay, I know, but they can do it, I think. And so what I've had to grow in look, there are qualified people out here, and if I can just state the expectation and get it out of my head, people usually can rise up to that. And I've been really blessed when I've seen board members do that. Hey, one of our expectations is that board members lead a devotion once a year. As you come on board, when are you going to do that? Great, thanks. Also, there's a financial commitment and attendance commitment, and that's just part of what it means to be here. Thank you for joining our mission. The last one here, review your meetings and materials with a lens toward what feedback or input or experience am I seeking from the board? All too often, I see staff come and just present and I say all too often because I've done this, all right? I get exhausted. I'm trying to lead an organization, trying to do my thing, and I just come with this information to the board that I just put at them. And I say, any questions? And it sounds like this. Because I have not given one moment thought to what feedback I even want them to give me when I give this information. What question would a board member ask as I present a 4-page, conditionally formatted, crazy pivot table thing? What am I even looking for them to contribute in this moment? What counsel am I needing from them on this? Right? Who is my audience? This is a basic question, but it's a pro tip on engaging the board there. Hey, we're doing well on time. We've covered, and y'all are this fire hose is crazy. And I'm yeah, it is, but it's my last session, so we're just going to keep rolling. So board of directors, we covered this side of the bow tie. All right. And now we're going to move to this side of the bow tie. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to hit some HR basics. I'm only half qualified to do this just because I've been doing it for a while. There may be some people who are a lot more knowledgeable about these things, but I'm just taking an assumption that I'm going to pretend y'all don't know what all these are, so that's what I'm going to do. And then we're going to get some meat right here. We're talking about right person, wrong seat for a little while. Number 1, this varies by state, but there's this idea of being at will or for cause. What this really relates to is how you can employ people and how you can no longer employ people. So certain states here in orange are, public policy exemptions. Okay, there are some exemptions to this, but largely the ones in orange are your at-will states or at-will employers, meaning essentially that I can terminate an employment relationship with anyone at any time without cause. That's what at-will means. Not every state is that way. In other states, there is an at-will for a period of time, and then there has to be documented cause after that, okay? So can't speak to everybody's state in here, just trying to give you that bucket of an awareness, are you an at-will state, and what that means when you read it, versus being for cause. Best practice, no matter what, is to document what you're doing and giving a reason if you're coming to the place of ending employment, but it's what the letter of the law requires there. Next, exempt versus non-exempt. What we mean here is, are you exempt from overtime pay or are you not? All right. And so exempt employees are not eligible. Non-exempt employees are eligible for overtime. So exempt folks, these are typically your salaried folks. They have to be in certain job categories. You can't just like say you want somebody to be exempt because that helps the finances of the organization to like limit someone. That is not legal. All right. Work hours for exempt employees, no specific work requirement. There is a minimum salary threshold that you have to be paid in order to be exempt. And then usually there's more flexibility. We'll come to FLSA and I'm sorry. Oh yeah. Okay, not covered for overtime under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Non-exempt employees over here, typically hourly, could be salary if they're not meeting the threshold there. These are folks who generally have less flexibility in their schedules. Good job descriptions designate a job as one or the other. What class is it here? All right, and what else do I want to make on this? I think I get to overtime rules in a second. Yeah, I think that's it. Exempt, non-exempt. Many of you probably already know that already, but wanted to cover that. Next, some of the wage risks here that you can run afoul of and be, have legal challenges over not paying people correctly. Here are 10 of the most common, but the ones that I wanted to highlight. Number one, you've got to track overtime and you got to pay people for it. You got to do it. But that doesn't mean that everybody has to work overtime. Okay. What it means is that you can't discipline somebody just for working overtime. You can discipline someone if you had a policy in place that said they must seek approval in order to have overtime, and they did not. They failed to get that approval. Okay, so that, just to clarify that distinction, what you want to have is you want to have a policy in place that says something to that effect. They should check with a manager or notify, and then have a procedure in place in order to attend to those things. Sometimes in organizations we actually lean on, we say, you know what, actually the overtime's worth it to us. If somebody's willing to put that in, it's actually cheaper than hiring the whole other person if we're not quite to that point yet. But those are some of the governing things. You gotta watch. We really do need to watch this because the rule here is that you can't just have people working off the clock on things. Like, your non-exempt employees are supposed to log their time when they're doing work related to the organization. So checking email or just looking ahead on something like that. If their job is not lending, if you're expecting them to do something that requires that level of flexibility, then you need to start entertaining, is this really a non-exempt, is this an exempt, non-exempt position? How are they tracking that time? Am I willing to pay the threshold to really move them to the exempt category? All right, those are just some of the things we have to wrestle with there. And the other one that's tough, look, I've been a COO too, and some of these are just great on me when I'm just trying to run the business, but not allowing for appropriate breaks is actually a violation of some of these fair standards. Now, look, this is why I think it's good for us to go back to why we're even talking about these things. Because work is good, but it's a 6-to-1. I'm supposed to give rest to people. Like, these are things that are imposed upon me on the letter of the law, but we should be looking for these things to take care of our people, because we believe that honoring them and inviting them into the work in a meaningful and sustainable way is a part of our calling. All right, next is, sometimes I see this kind of creep up in our world a little bit, but let's just clarify this. W-2 versus 1099 employees versus contractors. They're labeled that based on the tax forms that are used to report to the IRS what payments they received on that year. W-2 is what we think of typically more as the direct employee. The employer is paying for a portion of their payroll taxes. Usually this is where they would be eligible for benefits and things like that. A 1099 employee, on the other hand, has all of the tax liability for all of the payments that they've received. Now, in small nonprofits who have tight budgets, I have seen people want to go the 1099 route and maybe even up their pay to compensate for some of the tax liability that they're going to have, because it makes it easier for them. They don't have to do the payroll tax tracking, and they don't have to assume some of these other overheads. The challenge with that, though, is that a 1099 is supposed to have some degree of self-direction and responsibility for the timing and outcome of their work. All right, so if you're using 1099 only as an administrative relief, you just need to probe on that a little bit, because you got to say, well, then there is some autonomy that that person can have in when and how they do this, or that there's a contractual agreement that they assent to that outlines those standards, okay? This is a helpful vehicle. Sometimes it came up in our executive summit yesterday around, creating a way to talk about mission alignment and how do we bring people in and what does it mean to be fully in here, that people have highlighted at times in emergencies to cover a gap or maybe a departing provider left. The use of a contracted employee help like satisfy what we wanted to do to remain true to the mission while also not neglecting a patient need in a moment, that still kept this like firewall in there of like what we mean when we're doing that, okay? I'm glad to expound on that later, but just highlighting one of the uses of that. Okay, there are protected classes in hiring folks and for what reasons you can terminate. So if you terminate someone for one of these things, or if you disqualify them from the hiring process based on one of these things, you could run afoul of federal law here. Now, you can't discriminate hiring or terminate for these reasons, but exemptions do exist for religious organizations. That's a frequent topic that comes up at CCHF conferences that is better handled other places. I just want to highlight that this is a perennial, perennials like even not frequent enough. This is an ever-present struggle and tension within organizations trying to fulfill the mission and trying not to, because what happens is that we recruit HR staff who are doing their best to uphold and keep the organization in line, who maybe are not fully acquainted with the exceptions that can be afforded if an organization is willing to go down that line. Okay, next are, from a staff management standpoint, we are responsible for also thinking through disability accommodations. So this is why if on a job description you see you must be able to lift or do, how much walking, standing is required, those things are on here to already give the organization a sense that if someone now comes with a medical condition, you're not now making a determination of their suitableness for this job at that point. You had already clarified that when you had placed them in the job as what the physical requirements were for completing that. Right, so that then when they come with that concern or new situation to you, you're now saying, all right, let's look at the job description. It says we need to do these things. Are you able to do those with the condition you have? With reasonable accommodations that we can make, great, we proceed forward. If not, that's what gives the organization at that point to make a tough decision. Is there another role that we have? Or maybe this job is no longer suitable with that, but that's the minimum that's required for organizations to at least have that clearly stated and make reasonable accommodations. An encouragement on this, as with other things, don't decide these alone. Seek out counsel on these. I'm just trying to give a base level understanding of some of these. All right, last one on the HR basics here, federal family medical leave here, FMLA. It starts kicking in when your organization is 50 employees or higher. So you can offer these things, but once you hit that size, you have to offer these things. All right, and it took me a while to understand this. What FMLA is a 12-week job protection for one of these, for a qualifying event. But it only kicks in, an employee does not qualify for FMLA till they've been at the organization for a year. They've worked as at least, that comes out to about 20 hours a week, so they're like more than like half time. And you have to be, at a certain size. The 75 miles thing is about, it's giving some leeway for like essentially like a federated organization where there's like 3 or 4 small places that are spread out. Yep.
Some of the clinics that like treat their own employees, how have you seen this play out, good or bad?
Whew. Yeah. The question is, for organizations that provide medical care or health care to their own employees, how does, what are some good or bad things associated with that? I think here's some of the pitfalls that I see in our organizations. I'll speak both to the care and to just our Christian nature and the culture that we have in many places. Often what happens as our organizations and the culture that we try to promote is that often employees disclose more than is typical in a different type organization. All right, it just happened. I want prayer for this, or I'm doing this. And actually that information becomes known through a voluntary disclosure on that, right? Then, of course, some of that information is known because the care is actually being provided here. To the degree possible, we have to construct and erect the deepest and most impenetrable of firewalls in our brain between that knowledge as their care provider and their knowledge of that as their employer, and not transgress that barrier at all, you know? So one of the challenges of beginning to act on some of that information prior to that being disclosed in an employee-employer relationship, not great, okay? Now, there have been times where employees, it's not really FMLA related, but let me just go down another case. At many of our organizations, one of the things we wrestle with is how to pay for health benefits for our folks. You know, and so we try to do things like caring for our own patients or something to get to maybe a self-insured status, or, you know, we do a lot of creative things in that space, okay? If any of you have been in those conversations when you're re-quoting benefits, when you're quoted based on history, you look at the disease conditions that are in your population and what the drivers are, what those costs are. And you might know who that is, okay? Here's what's inbounds, here's what's not inbounds. Not inbounds, I know who that is, and I want to approach them and get them to pursue some other medical insurance option so that I can save money for the organization at large. I only say these things because I think these things, okay? I'm not attributing them to somebody else. I'm just saying these things are, yeah, my former boss who's in the room had to live for me saying all these things out loud, you know, like, could we do this? I don't think that's the right thing to do. Okay, sounds good. One of the things you can do, though, are like, if employees would like, you know, these, you can say it like, these are some of the conditions that are doing, we have some alternative options for that, available for that. If somebody would like to disclose and have a conversation with HR about that, and some other ways that we could look into maybe some alternate medication options than the name brands that, you know, there's some pathways on that, but it has to come from the employee engagement side of things for them to disclose that. And we just can't originate from knowledge that we had otherwise. Yeah. Okay, we've got, I am just so grateful that y'all showed up. I know I'm just like giving y'all a bunch of stuff, but thank you for being at this point. I think this is good stuff that's coming up next. All right, so 2 things I tried to cover: basics on the board side of things, basic on the staff side of things, assuming that y'all weren't HR experts, and if you were, you'll come tell me what I didn't get right in a minute. All right, but now I want to get into a little bit more of the leadership texture and flavor here to a little bit. This guy, Craig Rochelle, is actually pastor of Life Church, ton of campuses, large deal, but has a great leadership podcast. I've found it useful. You gotta be ready for like football coach, like level voice and just direct talking, and this is what we're gonna do. But he's a kind soul, and he's got a lot of good insight. And so I wanted to go through some of his insights around the idea of maybe you got the right person and maybe it's just the wrong seat. Okay, so I'm setting up here is, I'm not, I want to belabor it one more time. I am talking about the right side of the bow tie. Right person, wrong seat. I am not talking about the left side of the bow tie, okay? If you feel like you got maybe the right person, wrong seat of the board, that is the board's conversation, discussion. You can give it to them, discuss, that's for them to entertain and do. Your level of responsibility is from you down in the organization in assessing this, okay? So when we come to a place, something's not working right, what do we do, you know? These are the ones that really weigh on us, I think, or at least weigh on me, you know, that my wife, God bless her, has to listen to so much, you know? Baby, why don't you just do something about it, you know? So, here's some things that Craig has to offer here. There might be 4 things to go on this. We might have the right person, the wrong seat. So here's what the question is. This happens when somebody's gift no longer aligns with their current responsibilities. It's just, they're not gifted in the area that we're asking them to do. And we keep coming like, can't you do this? Why? And they're just like, it's not a fit. So for example, a relational person overseeing systems, you know? A visionary stuck managing details. Whew. A creative leader buried in administrative work, all 2 common examples. And so before we just feel like we have to get rid of them, We should consider if there's a way we could give them a different mix of responsibilities from the seat that would, could that unlock some of the strengths here? So we can adjust responsibilities is one way, maybe like narrow their focus, maybe clarify the outcomes, set clearer expectations, maybe add support to them. Maybe there's tools or resources they need. Maybe there's, dividing up the work between two team members to get there. Maybe it's removing some friction. Maybe they're always coming in with the same kind of problem, and you can help them by addressing that problem and seeing if that resolves the issue, okay? Sometimes you're afforded this, sometimes you're not, but it's helpful to think about that as an option, right? I've got a problem, this isn't working, maybe I just have them in the wrong seat. Maybe. All right, next. Right person, wrong pairing. All right, got two left feet working together here is what I'm suggesting, okay? So sometimes not every leadership struggle is about the person or the seat. Sometimes they're just paired with the wrong person that they're having to work with. So in some of our larger organizations, a CMO and a COO, they just work together all the time, Sometimes it just doesn't work, and they both kind of in the right seat. If they were like isolated, maybe they're doing it right, but together it's not working. So, sometimes if you for example, if you had like a really relational person and a really relational person together, it's like, man, everybody just feels great. And we are not getting anything done. All right. And you got a task person paired together doing that. Man, you could do more. You couldn't do more. But the people are leaving because nobody's checking in on how they're doing, right? So you guys know about that. So sometimes maybe I need to, maybe it's not necessarily a different seat, but it's looking at who's working closely together. Can I rearrange that as a leader? Can I get them paired with somebody else? Maybe not at the executive level, but maybe managers, maybe front staff team, these two are kind of, maybe I could just switch who they're working with. Or maybe a MA provider pairing, maybe they're actually really good at their both things. I don't need to change their jobs. I just don't need the two of them working together. Yeah. Okay, so another one is like maybe letting them have more autonomy. Like, you know what, maybe we just don't need to collaborate on this. Maybe some independent work here and we have shared results on that. Thanks for that contribution. Okay, I guess what we're trying to say is I'm trying to create a little checklist when you're running into that problem. Okay, maybe it's wrong seat. No, seat's right. Maybe it's the wrong pairing. Can I switch something there? So we got to assess who they're working with, right? What's the context that's around them, and maybe it's not just them. Okay, number 3, maybe you've got the right person but the wrong boss. Okay, so this is kind of like the pairing one, but just instead of peers, it's in the vertical relationship on the org chart. So a good person's working style just may not thrive under a certain type of leadership. Right? Some of us are like slow, methodical workers, just chart it out, all right? This thing's due in 3 months, due today. Man, I'm going to take a steady clip at that, and it's just going to be reliable and it's going to be done. Some of us are like, I like going outside, and like it's going to be a really long night before the due date, but I'm going to get it done just then, right? And so you can imagine having a boss-employee pairing that's like that. You got a steady worker, and somebody who's kind of like creative bursts, that can create some friction and may not bode well for somebody's like, I need to see it. Like, where's the progress? What's happening on that? Somebody who likes to be in the know versus somebody who's maybe more of an independent worker, that just may not be a great pairing on that. Now, some of that, if it's you as the boss employee, which one of you is going to be, I don't know. But sometimes you all may be leaders of leaders is what I'm saying in this. And sometimes you're noticing that something's not working in the organization between them. And maybe you're needing to help identify, maybe we should, a transfer can be appropriate sometimes, Sometimes it just works and it retains a great person and we help address the issue, and we can move forward there. So you can adjust the reporting structure, transfer somebody, or have them report to somebody else for day-to-day things and maybe structural things here. You can also try to coach the existing boss. Hey, have you noticed this? Or, here's an awareness of how you approach this. I've noticed you approach things in a slow, methodical way, and I've noticed this person delivers great results. Do you agree with that? Yeah. Well, is there a way you can give them some leeway about that and help just work through with them what the possibilities are? Okay. Last one here, right person, wrong season, okay? So sometimes we're just dressed up and, I don't know, I brought the wrong clothes to Cincinnati this time. Usually it just feels so cold at the CCHF conference, and my wardrobe didn't always reflect that. So sometimes people are the same way. So there can be two kind of season mismatches here, a personal mismatch or an organizational one. So the personal one is like, this person is phenomenal, and their parent is struggling with something real, and they just don't have the time to give it what they used to. And it's just not the right season for that, Some of it's organizational, and this one is hard. Okay? But sometimes organizations shift or change. Sometimes they grow. Sometimes they shrink. Sometimes they pivot into a different kind of line of business. And that person was phenomenal in that seat for that season. And now it's just not working because the organization has a different need now. But even having that category is so helpful for me to be able to have the courage to address that conversation with someone, because it feels honoring to me to just name it. And it somehow doesn't make them, you're the wrong person, because none of these said you're the wrong person. All right? And so just trying to keep that framework, there's dignity here, there's a right place for you, and we just need to find it. That may not be with us. All right? That may not be with us. It may be somewhere else. And the reason I say not for us, here's the other thing. None of your employees are going to be with you forever either. All right? And you might have been the right organization for the right season. You might have been the right boss for the right season. And they might have outgrown you. And they might need to go do something somewhere else. And they might need to be a better fit somewhere else. And we just need to trust God in those discernment process and do that respectfully with our people so that we can help them flourish and grow in those things too. Okay, a couple of quick things here. Look, clarity is kindness. All right? Clarity is kindness. You got to be honest when you're struggling and not just don't pretend that it's not there. Even if you don't fix it, it does something like lower our internal pressure to just name it with each other. Now, I understand that's a cultural thing, and it may betray the American middle-aged white male culture. I don't know, but I certainly find that's true. Finding whatever appropriate culturally appropriate way to bring that to clarity, I think is kindness, and to be honest about those things rather than talking about that person to everybody else. I don't think that's fair. Number two, delaying compounds the problem. New problems arise when we're not addressing these things. All the physicians in the room know. It's like you keep seeing the patient and you keep seeing the same problem and you're not doing something different. You're not doing justice to the patient. And so the same is true for our staff. All right, and then last, placement stewardship. The goal of leadership is not to make people comfortable, but to position them to win. Right? A good coach on the sideline, if somebody's their jump shot from the right side of the court is better than their one on the left, let's get them on the right side of the court. Could we please? Let's just put them over there where they're got a higher percentage shot. And if they off season want to work on their left-handed layups, God bless them, do it, and then they can be on the left side. But until we do that, let's get them where they're going to, so placement is stewardship, and that's a responsibility for us to have that vantage point of where people are most effective for themselves and for the good of the organization. All right, I have adopted this AI disclosure habit here because I think it's a good practice just to have to confess how I rely on this other tool here. Mainly what I did is for this one, I tend to have a lot of thoughts in one place, and so I'll just go into a voice mode with it, and I'll say, here's what, I'm leading an hour-long workshop on these 55 things that are in my brain. Can you help me get it in an outline format? And then I'm able to iterate on that and turn that into slides. The last thing is that I felt like I had a number of things on HR basics, but I did use that to research some of those as well. And I find that helpful on artificial intelligence, like this listing of options that I might not have considered, and then to select from those. Okay, I think we've got maybe a couple of minutes if there's questions. Well, I've got 1 minute for questions, so you better pick. Any questions from the group as we've gone through these? Yes, ma'am.
So if you can see that there's dysfunction in your board,
Yeah.
not math,
Yeah.
At the end of the day, who fixes that? Because the executive director is really, their heart is in the thing, and the chair of the board, it may not be, and maybe that's why there's problems. So how do you?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, running the play, the executive director to the chair is how you provide that feedback, and you've got to do whatever you can to persuade them. Now, let's have an intervention for the board chair, Chair, I've got I'm not trying to go behind your back, but here's the executive committee. Do you all see, and trying to trying to state the expectations of what's needed and trying to show the gap from what's happening and trying to just continually and faithfully present that. That may come from the executive, the highlight of what we agreed the expectation was and what I'm getting. Continue to present that gap faithfully and do what you can to get the board to respond to that. Yeah, there's certainly other avenues to go. You just have to understand the level of nuclear option you pick on some things. You can go wider and you can, prevail upon board members directly to do that. But usually that would feel out of bounds, in most proper governance standings. Yeah. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Would it be possible to get access to your presentation slides?
Yes, I was told that somehow I can upload it to the Whova app. That's what somebody told me in a previous session. I'm going to try that. If not, somebody also told me you can message me in the Whova app, and so I'll know. So you don't have. Anyways, those would be two avenues. Be glad to share. Yeah. Okay, I'm around so I can take other questions, but in the honoring of time, I want to close it here and then give a moment just for the survey. So I've loved this resource out of Praxis Labs has some great resources, our redemptive nonprofits, redemptive entrepreneurship, rule of life, but this one pulls it out for both sides of the bow tie. So for the board, we invest deeply to cultivate a healthy, engaged board, refusing to treat governance as a necessary evil. We pursue active unity and diversity within the board, ensuring that all stakeholders are represented and that expectations are high, clear, and mission aligned. I love that. Love that. It's really helpful. All right, team. We develop a leadership team that will outlast the current generation. You can't burn them out now. We got to have them for tomorrow. We reject a pattern of overdependence on one charismatic leader. We cultivate talent by developing each person for and beyond their contribution to the mission, instead of treating them solely as organizational resources. This would be the proactive, preventive approach to right person, wrong season. How can we think about actually equipping something and preparing them for the season they're going to, rather than just finding ourselves in a season that doesn't match anymore? All right. Hey, thank you all for coming. I'll stick around if there's any questions. Appreciate you all. If you would take a moment, I did something wrong with the session 4 one. I think this one links to session 5 survey. Take a moment, give some feedback. I know both myself and the CCHF folks appreciate that.